From the News Channel 5 Network, this is Inside Politics.
Hello, everyone. I'm News Channel 5's political analyst, Pat Nolan. Welcome to Inside Politics. We have a very unique guest joining us on the show today. He is Joshua DuBois. He's been a spiritual advisor to President Barack Obama. Mr. DuBois, thank you for coming on the show today.
Pat, it's great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Now, I should add welcome home.
Yeah.
You're a native of Nashville. Tell us about your local roots and your history here.
That's right. Raised here. My parents and grandparents and everyone's here. My little brother and sister in school in Nashville. Went to Tom Joy Elementary School myself and Meg's for middle school. So Nashville through and through.
Now, how did you come to this job of being the spiritual advisor to President Obama? Do you have religious training?
Well, I was associate pastor at a small church, but when I first started working for Barack Obama, I had no idea I was going to be his spiritual advisor and send him a devotional every morning.
And you actually started working for him when he was the United States
senator. That's right. He was running for the presidency in 2008, and I was just a junior staffer doing outreach around the country. And one day I thought, this is a guy who has a lot of different support around him. He's got policy advisors and political support, but I wondered who was thinking about his soul. And so I decided to send him an email. I got his email address from a friend of mine, and I drafted up a little meditation based on the 23rd Psalm. I had no idea what his response was going to be or if I was going to get fired for emailing him, but I sent it off, and he wrote me back and said, Joshua, this is exactly what I needed this morning. And
you were a sort of a junior staffer at that time.
That's right, yeah.
What did you have to do to get your courage up, if nothing else, just to send that first email?
I was doing a lot of praying and just, thinking that every person on the face of this earth needs to have a moment where they're disconnecting from the busyness of the day and trying to connect to eternal principles. And even the president needs that. And so I thought maybe I could provide that service for him.
You've written a book that's out now called The President's Devotional that has a 365, one for each day of the year, to look at some of the things that you've sent the president over the last couple of years, because you send him a devotional every day. Mm-hmm. When you were going through looking at this, how did you decide what things to put in there, and are these things spiritual in nature? Are they political? Are they a little bit of both?
They're spiritual in nature. That's really grounded first and foremost in Scripture, and it's about a relationship with God and with Jesus and how to cultivate that relationship. But in addition to that, it weaves together history and culture and song. There's devotionals about everyone from Abraham Lincoln to Johnny Cash and what we can learn from them about important principles in life.
Now, getting back to when this all started, when you first started working for him, you actually first saw the president when you were in a restaurant, almost a bar in Washington.
That's right, yeah.
And you were eating, I think you said, a half-pound hamburger and fries.
That's right.
You almost felt like there was a religious calling, even though you were in a less than religious atmosphere when this happened.
Yeah, I knew that I was a progressive, I was a Democrat, but I also knew I was a Christian, and I wanted to work for someone who could combine faith and politics and really speak to their values, and I wasn't finding anyone that I could work for.
But it wasn't easy to go to work for him. You didn't go to say, I want to work for you, and they hired you on the spot.
No. I sort of beat down their door until they gave me an interview, and so I started with him after a lot of persistence.
The president has said, obviously, good things about what you've sent him. Does he share these with other people? Does he share it with his wife, his daughters, or anybody else?
I'm not sure what he does with every one of them. He does reach back and tell me that they're meaningful and have a good sense of the ones that he particularly likes. He gave a beautiful quote for the cover of the book as well. And so, he's talked about how meaningful the devotionals are for him.
Now, you've left the White House, but you continue to send these devotionals to the president every day?
That's right. I send them in the morning, yeah.
Where do you come up with all the things that you get from him? Do you in some ways rip them from the headlines? Do you know what the president's kind of going through? Particularly when you're in the White House, you must have seen his schedule. Did you know, well, okay, later this week, I know this is coming up in Congress, or he's going this place. Did you do some things because you knew he was going to be in a situation where you thought he might need this kind of spiritual guidance?
For the most part, I actually did not peg it to what was happening in the news on a given day. I didn't want the president to have the sensation of reading his morning news clips when he opened up this devotional. And so I really tried to focus on eternal principles, how to love God, how to love your neighbor, how to get through tough times with joy. And that was the kind of the focus for most of the devotionals. Sometimes they are pegged to things in the news, but for the most part, no.
Now, this does not go to the White House staff. This does not go to the Secret Service, and they look at it, and then the president sees it. I mean, since the beginning, you have sent this directly first to the candidate and then to the president himself. I mean, directly to his BlackBerry.
That's right. He opens it up on his BlackBerry every morning, and no, it doesn't have to be vetted or anything. It's just a word of Scripture and a meditation to inspire him and hopefully inspire other people now, too.
Because of that unique access to a president, do you first, do you pinch yourself about that? And secondly, do you sort of set up some guidelines for what's appropriate for me to send to the president and what's not, just given sort of the separation of church and state and some other things like that?
Well, I should say I did this in my personal capacity and still do. It wasn't an official part of my job in the White House. Officially, I led the White House faith-based office, which meant I helped the president partner with faith-based organizations around the country on important national challenges, from hunger to homelessness to job training and so forth. So this role of being a spiritual advisor and sending him a devotional, that's just something I did on my personal time. And it wasn't a part of the taxpayer-funded role that I had.
When you started this during the campaign, I think you said it began. You sent this to him in what you thought was a sort of a low point, or not a positive situation where the campaign was. When was that during the campaign?
It was in 2008, and it was kind of at the height of the economic crisis, and lots of things were happening with our economy, and a lot of attacks coming from the other side, of course, about the president and his leadership. And so I thought this is a moment where he may need a little encouragement.
Did you think you'd still be doing it almost 6 years later?
I had no idea. No, I didn't know how long it was going to last, and I did not know that the president would respond so positively. And so I'm honored to continue to do this.
When you put these together in the book, how did you decide what was the best things to put in there, and is there enough to even do a second book on something like that?
Well, I thought that I wanted to pick the ones that weren't just applicable for President Obama, but for everyone else around the country as well. And so I picked ones that are about loving your neighbor and getting through tough times and finding joy in the midst of sorrowful moments. And so topics that could be accessible to everyone, whether it's the president or stay-at-home mom and everybody in between. And so that's kind of what the President's Devotional is about.
Joshua DuBois is our guest. He's a spiritual advisor to President Obama, and he's also a native of Nashville. We'll continue our conversation with him after you watch these messages.